The first writing ever recorded was in Mesopotamia at Ur, where Abraham came from, 6,000 years ago. This writing was symbolic and it was called cuneiform. Goes on about the language. Spoken, Ktav Ashurit or Ashurit writing, first languages. At the time of Yoshua, or Yeshua, Mashiach, or Jesus the Christ, this language became known as the scribal language, Lshana Supprayah, or the scribal tongue. Among the descendants of the Ashurit people today, this language is better known as Lshana Ateeqa, or the ancient tongue. This language is in fact the ancient Aramaic, the scribal language, the very language that the Jewish prophets and scribes recorded the Old Testament in their Babylon 2,500 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, and afterwards in the Holy Lands. This is the same language that Noah spoke, the same language that Abraham, Isaac and Jacob spoke, and the same language that Joshua or Jesus spoke. It's the language that the New Testament was recorded in, because it's a derivative of the original ancient Ktav Ashurit, this being the Galilean Aramaic, which he uttered when he was suffering on the cross. Not Greek, not Hebrew. Today there is a controversy about which language the New Testament was recorded in. The Western churches have staked their claim on Greek, but the Greek translators of the scriptures during the apostolic age knew that the New Testament was originated in the language Joshua or Yeshua Jesus spoke, and the knowledge of the ancient Aramaic was much better than the knowledge of the Western churches today. In other words, the Greek translators and early converts to the apostolic faith didn't have all the mistakes in the interpretation that the Western churches have injected into their Bibles today. So when the Western seminarians learn the Koine Greek, for example, they don't learn it correctly, just as the Hebrew taught at seminaries is not the correct Hebrew, it's modern Israeli Hebrew. Otherwise, why do the Western churches have all the names except for Adam? Wrong. Why is the name of Joshua, or Yeshua Mashiach, translated as Jesus, but Joshua Bar Nun is translated as Joshua Bar Nun? If Joshua is Jesus, then Joshua Bar Nun should have been translated as Jesus Bar Nun. And why is the word Trinity missing from the Western Bibles? Apparently it's missing from the JWs. They reject it, supposedly. Of course, languages evolve and mistakes are carried over into translations of the scriptures. However, the mistakes in the Western Bibles are deliberate distortions, and that is why they have no intention of correcting them. So the Western churches are going to continue claiming that the New Testament was originated in Greek, and seminaries will continue to teach the Hebrew that denies the name of Joshua comes from the Old Testament, and that the concept of the Trinity is recorded in the scriptures, and so on. So they're going to deny that the Trinity is there, like many people have on social media, YouTube, etc. Furthermore, it is not only modern Hebrew and Aramaic. It is not only modern Hebrew and Arabic that have evolved from the ancient Aramaic, but all the human languages have evolved from the first language spoken from the very beginning, i.e. Lshana, Ateeqa, Supprayah, including the Koine Greek, which is akin to it, Latin, German and English. What Victor Alexander discovered was that he could understand the ancient Aramaic language of the scriptures by analysing modern Aramaic, his native language, the language he learned as a child from his parents. He found out that all languages can be traced to the same root, which is the first language spoken in Mesopotamia. This is what makes his translation special. There are no contradictions in the scriptures, only mistranslations based on racial pride, prejudice, bias and self-interest. At a time when the world is fighting over which religion represents the truth, we should realise that we must accept one source alone, for the authentic scriptures, and that the Old and the New Testament scriptures recognise only one Lord, and that Joshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, is that Lord if we are to have one true faith. For Jesus said in Matthew 12:39-41, he replied and told them, however, a wicked and adulterous generation wants signs, and no signs will be given it, except for the sign of Jonah the prophet, or Jonah. For just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. He died, right? Was placed in the tomb and rose again, right? After 3 days, supposedly. The men of Nineveh will rise at judgment with this generation and hold it accountable, for they repented by the preaching of Jonah, and behold, one greater than Jonah is here now. So he's talking to these Pharisees, and he says, "Yeah, look for me in the scriptures. It talks about me from the very beginning. In the beginning, Genesis, Breetah, etc. Up until that point." And he says, "Now, you don't believe I'm who I say I am. Yet it's talking about me and that person is standing right in front of you. Okay? So said, he's blaspheming, say he's from God, his father's God, all this sort of stuff, right? This reference by Ashurit or Jesus to the men of Nineveh goes back to 800 years before. Therefore, we should understand that the Old Testament scriptures clearly concern the Lord in all the centuries since humanity existed. In the beginning of that Breetah or Genesis in Aramaic, to that point and further to the end of Revelations, right? 21 or 22. Okay. Ashurit, Jesus read from the book of Isaiah and quoted Jeremiah from the ancient Aramaic. The Lord does not mention anything about the scriptures being recorded in Greek. He probably spoke Greek because he's a carpenter, right? Customers, some of them might have spoke Greek or Arabic or whatever, right? Being the Son of God, he probably could speak anything, right? Any language. Don't know about Mary, but maybe, who knows? If he knows all, then he can speak all, right? And if you take the Ashurit Jesus out of the formula, you have nothing. Okay, and apparently the sculptor Charles Schumann asked Victor and Alexander to give them the ancient Aramaic words that say God is verb. So he tells them that the first verse of the Gospel of John contains the words God is Multa, which is essentially the same thing. So he submitted the words to him from the ancient Aramaic scriptures. They are the words inscribed above. Right here and here. The above sculpture was created by Charles Schumann for the Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit from Israel. It was at the San Diego Natural History Museum. All the Dead Sea Scrolls are in the ancient Aramaic language. None of them are in Greek. Aramaic, Hebrew Aramaic. But that's what he told this guy, or relayed to this guy, and this guy did this carving by the looks of it. Because it says it was created by him for the Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit from Israel. Okay. So I hope you found that really interesting. We do have more information here in our notes. We sort of really haven't stuck to it. We've jumped all over the place. Spent more time on the Breetah or Genesis scriptures. So these Egyptians, we jump in again. Okay, here's the Genesis or Breetah account from the original ancient very old Ktav Ashurit, Lshana, Ateeqa, Supprayah, the Aramaic language of God spoken by him to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, paradise. That there flowed a river through Eden to water the garden that split into into four tributaries, or heads or rivers. They were named Gishon, Pishon, the Euphrates, etc. The Tigris, which flowed around, what's the fish of the Gishon, the Pishon, that flowed around today's modern Kuwait, right? Havila, and the next one flowed around Ethiopia, supposedly Kush, right? And the other one floated around or through Ashur or Mesopotamia, there's the Tigris, the Euphrates, etc., right? Where these people, these descendants of Adam, eventually migrated, okay? And they resided there, and they became known as the Ashurit, and spoke the Ashurit language, or Ashurit language. Mesopotamians, of which Syria was a great nation. Syria, today's modern Syria. So, if you hear any claims that the Egyptians were the first people, well, that's completely wrong. According to scriptures, they were descendants who came later of Noah's sons and his descendants. They were descendants of Noah's sons, Cam, Japheth, and the other guy. Okay. So yeah, be very careful of this particular video, this documentary. It's very interesting. There may be some fact in it. We're not saying that they're completely wrong. Just, I guess, to promote their religion, they do twist things. Like one of the verses that they uttered was that God said to these Hebrews, these Israelites, I am the God, your God Jehovah from Egypt. Right? That's one translation which they've actually got wrong, because there are Aramaic, Syriac translations in English where it says, I am the God that took you out of Egypt, right? That liberated you from Egypt, or that God that when you were in Egypt as slaves, right? It's not saying I was Jehovah, the God of Egypt. It's a twisting, it's a mistranslation. But there's so many different translations out there that actually say that, so people will say, oh yeah, it does say, my NIV says that he was the God Jehovah of Egypt, right? That all came from the Egyptians. It's incorrect. Yeah. We have just verified it through them being, these Ashurit, etc., being around way before the Egyptians, right? Because they were eventually descendants of Noah's sons, Cam, etc., right? And lived in this place called Mizraim, Put, or Canaan. Yeah. So these people that were there, residing there, before the descendants of Abraham went there, took over, right? Intermarried, adopted their religion, their culture, their god name, El, Baal, etc. Okay? They were there around before these particular people, these pre-Egyptians, who were building like dirt mounds, the prototype of the pyramid that they perfected later on. Okay, so hopefully this has opened your eyes to these people and their claims. Again, in our notes here we've got flowed a river through Eden to water the garden that split into 4 tributaries, heads or rivers. They were named the Gishon, the Pishon, the Tigris, Euphrates, and they went around different lands, right? Around Asher, latter geographical location, home of the Ashuri or Ashurites, Ninevites of the book of Jonah. He went there to warn about the wrath of God coming upon them for their sins, their idol worship, all that sort of stuff. In the Levant or Middle East. Then later on in scripture, the Egyptians or descendants, sons and daughters of Noah's son Cam, who was the ancient forefather of the peoples of Mizraim, Put, Canaan, etc., of which the pre-Egyptian mound builders, Egyptians, originated from. Eventually, right, they came from there. These people probably migrated out, and then they followed the Nile and started to build these mud huts, mounds, etc., etc. Then they eventually built these pyramids, and they become this really clever nation, and they eventually united north and south, upper and lower, and they became this really amazing civilization, because they came together and they stopped fighting each other, they united, whereas everybody else can't be called civilized at that time because they're fighting each other, fighting their own countrymen, fighting others, they're at war with others, so they weren't being civil. These Egyptians were the ones that perfected civilization, right? They created a civil empire. Okay, so Abraham the Chaldean and the Awer, or Hebrews, descendants of Arpachshad, forefather of the Awer, later known as the Hebrews, along with Abraham, because they're all related, right? In the land Ur of Chaldea, Babylonia, where he was born, merged and journeyed from there into the land promised Abraham by God, known as Canaan. So the Chaldees, the Hebrews, existed long before the ancient Kemites or Egyptians, who built the first pyramid mounds, who historically may not have been the Egyptians. They might have been someone completely different, right? It might have been giants that lifted those rocks and put them in place, all that sort of stuff. Probably possibly a different people. Maybe later on, when Nubians or whoever invaded and took over, bigger, stronger types, because have a look at those wall reliefs and you see these skinny little figures, skinny little people, hardly any meat on them, and you see these big guys being beaten by them, all that sort of stuff. Probably the Nubians or someone like that. Finally decided they had enough to take over, and then they ruled from there onwards. Very, very different if you have a look at those wall plaques, those paintings, all that sort of stuff. You'll see it there. Okay, Hebrews in this era didn't speak Hebrew. Okay, they were basically a people that made a journey. Okay, there's no hint in those Breetah or Genesis scriptures that they did, but they spoke the language of their forefather Eber, or Heber, Heber, son of Apashkad. What he did, right? It's like the Aramaeans. Okay, they spoke the language of their forefather Aram. Also in the Genesis geological list, geology list. Okay, whatever language he spoke, it's not defining that they actually spoke Hebrew. You'd assume they would, right? Perhaps they also spoke Chaldean, like Abraham. He spoke their language, whatever that was. Or even a Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Syrian mix. It's possible. According to the native-born Aramaic-speaking translator Victor E. Alexander from Breetah or Mesopotamia, Syria, who states that Mesopotamia had the first libraries, universities, etc. They created the first alphabet. Before the ancient Egyptians, these Hebrew, Chaldean, Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian hybrids, interbreeds, or Semites, probably went down to trade with the Egyptians at that time, right? They were very friendly, the Egyptians, right? They got along pretty well, traded this and that, who were descendants of their forefathers, as revealed earlier, shown in the scriptures. So they were like distant cousins, so they're all related. They came from Noah, right? And they spread out. Noah's descendants are Noah's sons and his descendants, as seen in the Genesis Breetah, or Genesis in English, or Breetah in Aramaic genealogies. Again, they were related, and they probably traded with the people of the sea, the Phoenicians, etc. The Aramaeans or Syrians influenced change, it seems, in the later Egyptian style of writing, the hieroglyphs, as seen on page 3, column B, I think it is, in the book The Timetables of History, which we've already talked about, by Werner Grun. So with this record, it verifies that the Aramaeans influenced them to adapt and adopt and change their script, which probably went from right to left to right, or the other way around. Their language to Demotic, right? Instead of the rather difficult, burdensome, hard to write. Okay, this is talking about the Aramaeans, not talking about the Egyptians. But these Aramaeans might have influenced them to change to their Demotic script. Because they're probably, like the Aramaeans, they're probably looking for an easier way rather than the cuneiform, which is tiresome, bothersome, hard, to write down and all that sort of stuff. You want something easier. The Egyptian or Kemetic writings, carving, etc., were naturistic, cosmology related, the universe oriented form of scientific understanding, explanation, etc., according to these narrators on this particular documentary. The narrators then seem to change the 8,000 years statement to Egyptian history was 10,000 years ago, approximately at 1350 of the 154.5 length documentary. It's an hour and 54 minutes, 55 minutes. They have similar ideas. Many say outsiders in the days of Egypt, the ancient days of Egypt, plagiarized all their beliefs, all their stories, etc., when they may not have, but merely talk back and forth, exchanging ideas with, say, the Aramaeans, the Syrians, the Assyrians, whoever, right? Everybody else. And then they go on to say that the Hammurabi Code, or laws, and Judaism came out from their 42 laws of the goddess Ma'at. Yeah? The only thing that really came out of that was the Ten Commandments, because Moses spent his youth growing up there, so he learnt the religion, the culture, the language, etc. And when he got out, he probably was influenced by those because it's embedded in his conscience, right? Yeah, when it would have only come out of when Moses left the Ten Commandments, an adaptation of those 42 laws, probably. Because as a youth, he was raised in the house of the king, the Pharaoh, he would have learned all about the culture, language, Ktav, which we can't seem to find, the religions, customs, rites, rituals, etiquette, that's dress code, etc. The fashion. So being consciously embedded with that Egyptian knowledge, he would perhaps have carried it with him or on him. As he got to the well, when he ran away after he killed the Egyptian overseer, beaten the slave or something, he met Jethro, his high priest, the high priest, his daughter, who stated to her father, because he asked her, why are you back so early? Usually you're back late, or you don't have any water. What's going on? And she replied, an Egyptian man, or one who appeared to be dressed as an Egyptian, scared off the bullying tribesmen, who always pushed them away to get their camels and their watered first at the well. He stopped him from drawing the water and let us do it. Okay, so that's why we're back early. And he was wearing Egyptian clothing. So one of the narrators say that they, or we, the Egyptians, knew all about the heavens, universe, etc. before anybody else, right? They inspired all other foreign peoples in many ways. Well, that's actually incorrect, because these people came before them, right? These Hebrews, these Chaldeans, etc. So the connection between, this is one here, notes, the connection between Cush with a K, the Zagwe, Agor peoples, they are the ancient Cushites, according to this guy, what's his name, Sabi Bay, in his documentary. He reckons it's one and the same, but we say no, it's not, because the ancient Cushites with a K are different peoples. The ones with a C, the Cushites, are a different people as well. They're from the Mesopotamian region. They're not the same people, as he declares. They're the same people as, over time, people name their tribe differently, but they're all from the same people, Africa-wise. As again, we're saying that's incorrect, right? But if you take a look at the original ancient Ashurit, Lshana, Ateeqa, Supprayah, Aramaic second scribal language, or God, spoken by God, you'll find that Abraham's descendants eventually, at some point in time, journeyed to a certain area in Africa, probably that later called Ethiopia, that area, merged with those people they met, they intermarried, they had sons, daughters, descendants to them, and they renamed that tribe as Cushites, but with a K, because originally they were people of Cush, descendants of Cush in Mesopotamia, and these people had descendants via the original ancient very old Cushites with a C from Mesopotamia, Syria. So that's clearing that up. If you ever hear these people, Hebrew Israelites, etc., saying the Cushites were this and that, okay, and the Cushites in the Middle East are the same, they're actually not. Yeah, there is a difference here between the K and the C. There's a vast difference. But one original merged, had descendants, and these descendants were the Cushites with a K. So if you enjoyed this video, hopefully it's not too confusing for you. Let's open your eyes to the real history of it all. Okay, don't be fooled by these ones that claim that they're scholars, they've got this and that, all these doctorates. That doesn't really mean anything. Anyone can have a doctorate and be taught to parrot all this stuff, or do it personally, whatever. Make up they're a scholar, they're this, they're that. No one can touch them, as many we've experienced do. Certain people who won't be named. It just means that you got a whole lot of knowledge. Doesn't mean you're actually knowledgeable. Okay, so if you enjoyed it, this video, give us a like, subscribe to us, give us a like, add your comments below the video, and we'll get back to you on those as soon as we can. And you go share this video, this information, with all your family, friends and others, because all out there need to know the truth. the whole truth and nothing but that truth. They need to know the real truth according to the histories, the scriptural histories, and so forth. And we, the ministry of the real truth, strive to bring you that